You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm Carlos Noche, and I'm joined by my always cheerful partner, Lisa Schneier. How are you, Lisa?
Doing great today, Carlos. Thanks. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm good. So I am looking forward to today's podcast because it's with two people that I've known for years. So I'm looking forward to it. And with that, today's topic, everyone, is why a world-class RevOps team is the competitive edge your sales organization needs.
Woo! And to help us out with that today, we have Laura Adint. Am I saying that right, Laura? I should have checked that with you before.
That's all right. It's Adint.
Laura Adint and Sean Lane, who recently collaborated to release a book called The Revenue Operations Manual, which explains how to build a high-growth, predictable, and scalable business. Sean is a blend of strategic and tactical, customer-focused and process-driven, happiest when he is solving problems and building things. Sean's job is to dump all the puzzle pieces out on the table and put them back together. And Laura has a passion for building organizational capabilities and high-functioning teams to harness the energy and intelligence of the organization to accomplish things beyond what the collection of individuals think is even possible. So with these two people together who met in this magical transaction, actually started at Drift. Is that right? Yes.
That's correct. What an intro. Laura was actually my boss, Lisa. So that's where we started working together.
And you survived.
And we did.
Here I am. We're still here.
Yeah.
Here to tell the story.
You must be good.
Well, thank you both for coming to the show with us, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
What's something that Sean and Laura, that people that you work with would be surprised to know about you that you're passionate about? And Laura, how about we start with you?
Okay.
Since I've known you the longest.
Yeah, I'm really curious if I'm going to surprise the both of you. One hobby of mine, a favorite hobby of mine, is sporting plays. So I actually like to blow things up. And for my 25th anniversary from my husband, I received a shotgun, and it's a silver anniversary. So the shotgun has a silver engraving on it.
Nice.
That is so cool.
Did I surprise you too?
Yeah.
You did.
I'm surprised. And I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to derail this. So
when I recover from shoulder surgery, let's go. But I'm not very good, but I do want to get better. Sorry, Sean. What's your passion that's going to surprise us?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about passion, but like I think the thing that people are kind of surprised by when I'm meeting with them is like I actually played hockey my whole life, and people are like, "Really? Is that like I don't see that from you for some reason at this point in my life?" But yeah, that was what I did my whole life growing up. That was what I spent the vast majority of my time doing, and then you just don't really get to incorporate that too much into your work life and conversations, and so people are usually surprised at work when they hear that.
Well, yeah, Sean, like I go like this because you're after my Canadian heart. So did you try to go pro? Did you do the minors? Like what was...
Oh, no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the skill set would hit a limit at a certain point. You know what I mean? Like slightly above average high school player. And that was the wall that I was not going to go any further past.
Yeah, well, I totally get that. And you know what? Like it's still a great sport, like as far as the discipline, the energy, the fandom. Yeah. So
hey,
I figured I might have an ally there in you.
I played hockey too, by the way, but the extent of my fabulous career was a roll of electrical tape out on the streets of New York City, and then it was over.
Nothing wrong with that.
Hey, kept you out of trouble, right? Oh my gosh. Okay, so to talk a little bit more about you both, can you each share a little background on how you got to the point of collaborating on this book together, like the book on RevOps? You decided, I'm guessing here, but there was a gap in the marketplace. You thought, you know what, the two of us have something to share. So yeah, let's start with you, Laura. Like, what led to this?
So, Sean already mentioned he used to work for me at Thrift. And when I was leaving, I was basically pulling Sean into the chair that I used to sit into. So he backfilled me. And as we were going and was talking, he's like, what are you going to do next? And I'm like, well, I have this idea for a book. I've been kind of thinking about it. He goes, when you're ready, give me a call. And so it took a little bit of time, not long, but then we kept in touch and he's like, okay, are you ready? And it was great to pair up. And you're absolutely right. There actually was a gap in the marketplace. We did searches as we were looking through and we only found one. And it was really more about the case for why do revenue operations, not really from practitioners. And so we really felt like that's what we can offer is how do you do this? And then I'll let Sean tell the rest of the story because it's okay for just the two of us and our experiences, but there's more.
See, this is why we worked well together. She teased me up. She teased me up nicely. Yeah, I mean, I think Laura and I are not cocky enough to think that we have all the answers, right? And so one of the things that was really important to us as we were putting this book together was how do we make sure that we incorporate experts? Carlos is in there, so we use the term expert loosely, but
Yeah,
we
clearly.
do have a whole bunch of different folks that we brought in to lend their stories, lend their lessons, lend their expertise into the book. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've hosted a podcast that has had world-class operators on the show. So we had this amazing treasure trove of insights and interviews that we could pull from. And so that became kind of the primary source material for us in the book. And so included in the book, we've got a whole bunch of real world role models that we call them to tell their stories. And we also incorporated things that Laura and I wanted to showcase as well, which is we have these confession corners where people tell us about the things that didn't go quite so right and didn't go according to plan, because too many of these business books are just, the shining examples of how things always go perfectly according to plan. And we know in ops that is very much not the case.
Hey, so jumping into today's topic, sometimes I think, in these podcasts, we kind of go right into it and people go, but wait a minute, what do they mean by RevOps? So, Sean or Laura, you all decide. Maybe I'll start with Sean. Let's start with, how do you define revenue operations, right? What does that
Sure.
word mean? And then we can dive deeper into, okay, now how do we differentiate it and make it better? Is that fair?
Totally fair. And so I think, first of all, RevOps is one of those what we call black hole words that everyone has their own definition for. And so I think actually taking this moment to define it is super important. And I think the reason why it's so hard to get everybody on the same page about it is that it is an inherently cross-functional position, right? You have a whole bunch of different internal customers. And so the charter of a RevOps team can be very different. Does it include enablement, for example, right? Do you just support sales, marketing? So there's a whole bunch of stuff there. So when we were sitting down to write this book, we thought it was really important for us to come up with a definition that we thought could encompass really any org structure, but it was really more focused on the outcome of why this team should exist. So the way we think about it is we believe that in a world where you might have a whole bunch of different silos in your organization, revenue operations transforms those siloed, unpredictable organizations into high achieving, predictable, and scalable revenue engines. And so throughout the book, we come up with different examples and stories to talk about high achieving, predictable, and scalable engines to kind of fulfill that definition.
Thinking about RevOps, I mean, so we'll circle back to enablement at the end, but it can include everything from forecasting to the whole tech stack that we're using, to compensation, to structure, territories, everything else. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if I got this right, it's not that you're dictating all those things. It's you're working with individual key stakeholders from, head of sales across the organization, head of partners, everything else, to kind of help organize that and keep it straight for the organization. Did I say that okay?
Yeah, I think our job is to make all of those internal customers better at their jobs, right? And so we provide the tools, the processes, the systems to support the day in the life of all of those internal end users that you talked about, right? So Laura and I very much view sales folks or SDRs or customer success folks as our customers. And so the job of RevOps is there to improve the outcomes, for those end users.
All right. So I've seen organizations where we're hand in hand and things that's beautiful, little kumbaya. I've also seen organizations where there's a lot of friction. So Laura, how do you make it a differentiator for sales? How do you make RevOps, a differentiator that makes them better?
So one of the things that we really focus a lot on is designing with the end user in mind. And so really thinking of everything that we're doing from the end user in as the center of it. So, and that means a lot of times sitting down right next to someone to understand what it is that they're doing, how it is that they're doing, what they struggle with, and that really understanding deeply your customer, whichever customer that is, what their experience is like and how you can help them. So how do you reduce friction with your customer? You have to understand them first. And so sitting down and really getting deep into the weeds of understanding what they're experiencing and what's frustrating for them goes a long way into coming up with solutions that'll actually help, so that you're actually addressing what it is that they're finding frustrating. So both Sean and I have found that one key thing of understanding from your customer's point of view of what their experience is like and what they need to be able to do their job goes like so far, because you have to, you really want to like what they're doing and help them do what they're doing better.
I'm going to transition us a little bit into a very hot topic, which is around AI. So here we are in this world where AI is changing quickly. Companies, like we tend to hear some of the, I don't want to call them horror stories, but we'll say mistakes. We tend to hear some of the mistakes with OpenAI and how people are trying to use it to do research, and then, information becomes public that it shouldn't. But there's still so much value in how we can more efficiently and effectively do research on, our accounts, our clients, our potential accounts, our prospects. How can we use new AI tools today? So from call recording, assessment recommendations, feeding other apps and functions, there's all kinds of different things that are available to all of us publicly. So in your opinion, what you're seeing, let's just say two things. What's most effective? And then let's be careful to also say, like, what's the safest option when we're telling our teams you can use AI?
I think the rate of change you're talking about, first of all, like imagine writing a book while the rate of change is happening at the same time. Like we already are like the AI RevOps manual is what's coming next after this one comes out. And so we were actually pretty careful to incorporate some thoughts about AI into the book without being super prescriptive about an individual tool or an individual, brand or company. I think there's a few things. So to your first question about being effective, I'm actually super excited. This is probably my ops bias coming through, but I'm actually super excited for operators in this new world, because I actually think when you harness these AI powered tools well, it's going to be the ops people who actually are the ones who get to inject their own creativity into how these tools are leveraged within the company, right? Because, let's take the call recording example. Instead of having a sales rep update a field inside of your CRM manually when they get off the call, which we all know they absolutely love doing, the AI can distinguish exactly what the pain points were on that call. You could update all your MEDDIC criteria or whatever qualification methodology you're using. It can log your next steps, set your next meeting, all of that, right, directly into the CRM for you. So that's one way you might be able to harness it. But I think regardless of the methodology you use, or regardless of kind of which tool you're using, like that's where ops is going to be able to kind of like stitch together different experiences for those same end users that Laura was talking about. And then on your second question about safety, I actually just interviewed someone who works on the go-to-market systems team at OpenAI recently for the podcast. And he himself was basically like, look, like the foundational bare minimum of having security and kind of governance built into any connection you're making doesn't go away. You have to have this here, and you have to be really smart about the APIs you use, the endpoints you use, and the way in which those are or are not exposed. And so I think it's one of those things that, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like, you can't skip over that stuff just because you're excited about this new technology. You have to make sure you have those foundational security elements in place.
Yeah, I think that's only fair. I mean, I want to give people some concessions for the fact that we're all trying to keep up. And, so like everyone we talk to, it sounds the same from your perspective as well, is like we're just trying to make sure that we don't, cause some colossal damage. Like how can we embody all of this new technology that is going to help us be more effective and more efficient, and yet not, you know, put anything out there on public AI that's gonna, cause any problems for customers, right? So I do really feel like you just said, like, I feel like everyone's trying to do their best here.
I also think that once you've done it the new way once, you're never going to want to go back. Right. And so that's going to be the really tempting part about this is if someone goes from a company where they've really been forward looking and adopted a bunch of this stuff, whether that's internally or customer facing, if they go to a new company and they don't have that stuff, like it's going to be a disaster. Right. And they're going to feel like they're back in the Stone Age. And so I do think that's going to like create that pressure you're talking about for people who want to adopt it. And I think like ops folks, all the same challenges exist. You have to look for ways you can make people's day in the life more efficient. You have to get people faster to the outcomes they want, get to revenue faster, all of that. And so like the end goals don't change. I think it's just we have new means to get there.
All right. So let's talk about, since we're on this tech thing, let's talk about the entire tech stack. Because I think, let me flash back to other organizations I've worked with, and they go, look at all these tools our reps have access to. It literally looks like a NASCAR, with 1,000,001 logos. I'm like, I can't. Why are you spending so much money? I mean, there's no way they're using 23 tools. So what's the role of RevOps in helping to sort through what technologies work, which ones don't, and how do we effectively manage those? Or do they have a role in that area?
Oh, they do. I think that's really thinking about it. It goes back to that end user in mind of thinking about how do they live their day? Where do you make the information available to them when they're doing the activity that they're doing? And what our responsibility in revenue operations is to try and reduce that fatigue of having to learn the 40-second application. So we think about if they're in the middle, if the entire company is on Slack, for example, then why not go there? That's where your reps are. Go there to ask them how that meeting went, which we talk about this in the book of the ability to say, how'd that meeting go? And they can answer a few questions in Slack, which is where they already are. And then that goes into the CRM. Did they have to log into a separate tool? No, they didn't. Did they do things that were in their flow? Yes, they did. So I think that's really RevOps' responsibility, is to think about how do you take the burden off of your customers to have to learn the 40-second and keep it as clean as possible. We also think that there's probably a good trend right now going of consolidation of applications. And there is some streamlining of that will happen for both the operator as well as the users of the internal systems. And there's another, of just because there's a shiny new tool doesn't mean you have to put it in. And you got to think about, what do you have that already might do it? What could you get rid of? Or how do you consolidate? How do you think of these things in a proactive way so that you just don't add on the layers, that you're always thinking about streamlining things? So, Sean, I don't know if you had additional things you wanted to add onto that, but I can't agree more that it is revenue operations responsibility.
I think the thing that Laura taught me when we were working together was that you really had to question the what's in it for me for those people you're trying to put the tool in front of, right? If you can't clearly articulate the why to them, then you might as well not try and launch this thing because they're not going to use it, right? It needs to be in their terms and in the benefits to them. Carlos, you said something when you were on my show that I say to people all the time now, which is at the end of a training, you said people are super excited about the high energy that came out of the training. Everyone's all jazzed up about the concepts. And then as soon as it's over, the reps turn around in their chair, look at their manager and say, so how much of this are you actually going to make me do? And like that moment that you told me about, like if we flinch in that moment from a sales enablement perspective, like good luck. It's the exact same thing with these tools. If you don't have the buy-in of the leaders on the team, like, okay, we're going to focus on forecasting. Well, if your CRO doesn't care about forecasting, don't bother buying a tool for forecasting, right? Because all of that behavior change has to come from the top down and it has to be reinforced in every single routine that the company has.
Man, every now and then I get a good nugget. That was awesome.
See, I was
Sean.
listening.
I'm happy you remember that.
I was listening.
So here, let me give you an example again, because, so one of my clients, it's a multi-billion-dollar international organization. So there's a lot of complexity. I just went through this week. They have a pre-sales teams that wants to do a better job of qualifying deals so that they could better manage getting pre-sales resources on deals. So what do? They created a whole new questionnaire, which has nothing to do with their sales methodology and what they've been taught to do every day. It's just, and you look at these questions and there's not even a rhyme or reason to the questions. And I go, hey, what is this really for? Well, they're asking this because of this. That isn't what the description says. By the way, even if you just mapped it back, so they go, hey, you did this. This is what they're looking for, would be a lot easier to connect the dots for folks, because this is tool number 37. And this client, when I rolled out value selling, one of the pushbacks I got, and Lisa, you might remember, there's some Gartner research where it says I think it's Gartner, reps are only spending like 20, 30% of their day actually selling. For this account, I bet you it's less than that. Because I seen their tech stack, all they're being asked to do, the forms they got to fill out. I mean, they need admins. So any perspective on, is that RevOps role to really help, grease the skids and kind of go, hey, you know what? We need to do a better job to make these things, these processes more effective.
I think we believe it's RevOps' job to keep the outcome in mind, right? And to your point, the outcome all anybody on that team wants is to just spend more time selling stuff, right? Like they want to get the right solution for their customer, right? They care about pairing the right solution with that pain that the customer has. But all the different steps along the way is less important to them than the ultimate outcome, right? We had this guy who we interviewed for the book. His name is Maor Ezer. He used to run marketing at WalkMe. And so his whole life is enablement stuff, right? And he basically said to us, he's like, how would you just like to wake up one day and know how to speak Japanese, right? You don't want someone to teach you how to speak Japanese. You just want to know how to speak Japanese. And I think that's like his back row point was basically like, a lot of these tools are more about the how and less about the actual outcome. And what we really want to focus on in ops is making sure we can actually drive the outcome. So again, if you're going to pick a tool, make sure you know what outcome you're trying to drive. And then most importantly, if you have some, big launch that you're doing here, something people forget to do all the time is, all right, 60, 90, 120 days later, what is the metric we're going to come back and measure to know whether this thing actually worked? Because, especially at an organization as big as that one, Carlos, everyone's busy. Everyone's got their own little part of the business that they're responsible for. And I promise as soon as they launch that new tool, they're off and running on to the next thing, as opposed to someone being like, okay, now I own 3 months from now reporting back on how this thing actually went and the metric that we moved as a result. Did we prove or disprove the hypothesis that we had when we decided to invest time, money, and resources into this thing in the first place?
Love it, Sean. Really good question, and something every organization should be asking themselves. And I'll say that you knew, Carlos, and I have to ask, how do you see organizations successfully successfully being the keyword here, integrate these sales methodologies into their operating systems. So without, us having this heavy lift, what have you seen as must-haves for long-term successful sales methodology rollouts?
So one of the things that I think is so critical is that you turn around to the manager and you ask, hey, how much of this are you going to be asking me? And all of a sudden, after the training, all of a sudden, the forecast calls have all of those questions. The deal review calls have all of the questions. The language is being in every routine, and this is why revenue operations needs to be involved in these things, is that the revenue operations team is the one that runs a lot of those routines, right? The system, the meetings, the systems that capture the information, all of the things that make the company work and the daily activities, it's all in there. So if you haven't built it in, it's going to get forgotten as soon as you leave. And if it doesn't come up again, so what do you need to do? You need to bring it up. You have to ask the questions. It becomes, how do you ask for resources? Oh, look at those same things are coming up. This is the way in which you make a change, right? You make a change with an organization by the questions that you ask the organization. So that one I can't stress enough. It's got to go in the systems. It's got to go in your agendas. It's got to go in how you run your forecasts, how you run your deal reviews, how you ask for resources. It just needs to permeate, which it's the way, right? It's the way. Otherwise it just it's gone. And boy, that was so great. I felt such a high.
Right? Oh my gosh, it's so true. Oh, amazing.
I often say if you're going to do this later, what the rep hears is, oh, you're not ready yet? So I don't have to do this. You let me know when you're ready. So I couldn't agree with you more, Laura. If we could figure some of that out in phase 1 before you start executing the workshops, then all your ducks kind of align a lot better. This is how we're going to do it. If we don't have that answer because we rush to go do the workshop with the bald funny man, it might be a good workshop, but we have gaps, and they will, any organization will sense that. So I think it's a great point.
And by the way, the end users will love that too, right? Because they hate showing up to meetings and having 4 different questions asked every time, right? Like they want to have some consistency when they come to those routines to know what questions are going to be asked of them, what they should be expected to be prepared for. Because otherwise it's just like an interrogation that you have no idea what's coming next, right? And so I think that level of consistency is something that ops can help instill in all of the kind of operating rhythms, routines, cadences that you have in your team.
I've got a question that is not the easiest to answer, but I love asking it. So, changing direction a little bit, we have a couple of questions we ask most of our guests, not everyone, but you're special. And first thing I'll ask is, could you point to a time in your career where you feel like you either made a mistake or you learned from a mistake? What was it, and how would you advise our listeners to avoid it?
Yeah, I can go. So I mentioned we have this confession corner thing in the book. We purposefully make them anonymous. A few of them are me, right? and so
Me too.
I'll tell you about one of them, right? So this is actually something I work on with my clients all the time. And this was something that was a challenge for us in the early days of Drift. Early stage growing companies, new business is the lifeblood, right? New logo acquisition is the lifeblood. You instrument and go crazy on your maturity and understanding of how your new business funnel works. Meanwhile, everything in your customer funnel is falling way, way behind everything you're doing on the new business side, right? So upgrade, expansion, renewal, churn, like just is way less understood. And so it's like, okay, now it's time for us to launch our very first renewal process at the company. And something I had never done before in my career. So I go in with the CS leader, we lock ourselves in a room, we get up on the whiteboard, design this beautiful renewal process from scratch. This is going to work, no big deal. Go out, launch it to the team. Disaster, truly a disaster, like way too complex. isn't instrumented well. No one can understand it. They literally made me a t-shirt about the type of renewals that I built that was so bad. Kept my job, shockingly. But one of the things that happened after that, which I think is the lesson here, right, is one of my colleagues introduced me to someone who had built the renewal process at HubSpot, right? So like a great role model company for us at the time. I get on the phone with them 30 seconds into the call. They're like, you did this, didn't you? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I did. And they're like, okay, here's what you should do instead. And if I had picked up the phone and had that one call, the first 30 seconds would have helped me avoid weeks and months of pain. And so the whole reason why we put the confession corners in the book is for people to be able to skip over those painful moments. And so, yeah, like seeking out role models and getting outside of the four walls of the organization is something I did not do well in the beginning of my career, and would be the very first thing I would do if I was presented with a new challenge today.
I love it, Sean. That's awesome. Laura, what do you think?
It's such a good example. Mine's maybe it's a little further back, and it's one of those ones that really stuck with me. It was my first management job. And when I was in my first management job, I was sitting in the office at about 9 p.m. and I was doing the testing of this project that we were going through and trying to launch. And I looked around, and I was all by myself. And I went, oh, I'm all by myself. And then I realized that I had actually, not only had I drawn myself out, but I actually robbed my team of learning about the thing. I could have actually, if we had done it together, we would have been done long before, and we would have all been home for dinner. But I robbed my team of the experience of like learning from where the errors were. I thought I could do it. And that was one of the biggest lessons for me of, oh, bring others in. Go and seek out and don't rob your team of the ability to learn from these things, right? So that was one of like a big aha moment. And I did not end up doing that again, and making sure that I ended up pulling in the folks that can help, but also giving the team different chances to shine. And who knows, some of them turned out to be way better testers than I was. So it was one of those like, oh, you don't need to do it all.
Thank you both for sharing that. That's awesome. I just did a workshop last week, and we're talking about, I've been doing this a really long time, but I haven't peaked yet. I think I got room for improvement. So I don't know what word to use, missteps, mistakes, whatever, but I like the idea of fail early and often, because that's how we all learn. So that was awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. All right. Here's our last question of the day. Rock, paper, scissors. You can pick who goes first. We call it acceleration insights. What's that one piece of advice, be it business or personal, that you would love to share with our listeners that would make them better and successful?
Since I just used up my role models advice, the one that I'll add to that, right, is, and I think that the book is probably a 80,000 word encapsulation of Laura and I trying to do this. I think ops people need to develop their own perspective, right? I think too often they are the receivers of the directions, and they go off and do what is asked of them. And very infrequently do they actually come to the table with their own fully formed perspective of what they think should happen. And so my piece of advice would be, in the process of seeking out role models and learning, come back and develop your own point of view and bring that to the table when you're working with your go-to-market partners.
So my advice is never waste an opportunity to learn. And, as an ops person, you end up in a lot of very different meetings. And it may not seem relevant at the time, but you never know when understanding how a company does their asset inventory checking. You never know when that actually is going to be useful. So take every opportunity to learn as much about a business as possible, because you never know when you're going to be able to use it. And that is one of the beautiful things about operations, is that we get exposed to so many different parts of the business. And knowing the most about a business is how you can be the most effective.
I think that's awesome. I wish we had more time to talk more about different parts of the book and yourselves, because I think there's some great lessons there. I will tell you, as soon as it comes out, I'm buying a couple of copies from some of my customers because I think they're struggling with some of these hard questions. And I think it'd be a nice little reference manual for them to go back to, Sean, like you said, start developing their own, hey, here's my opinion or here's my recommendation. So I thought that was awesome.
Thank you. We appreciate it. This was a great conversation. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you both. If one of our listeners was interested in getting in touch with either of you, what's your preferred method of communication?
So you can find either of us on LinkedIn. That's a great way to search and connect with us there. Or if you want to learn more about the book, you can go to RevOpsManual.com.
All right. Cannot thank you enough, Sean and Laura, for being here on the show and taking the time to speak to us today. It's been great having you. Thank you again. All right, everyone, that does it for this episode. Please check us out at www.b2brevexec.com. Share the episode with friends, family, kids, dogs, whatever, coworkers, and subscribe through YouTube, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And if you like what you hear, you could do us a huge favor and throw us a 5-star review on iTunes. I'm Leisha Schneer, and this is my colleague, Carlos Noche. And until next time, we wish you nothing but the greatest success.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.